Sirens rip through the desert night. Mortars crash against the walls of a small Marine outpost. Tracer rounds slash across the sky like burning arrows. Through smoke and chaos, an armored truck charges the front gate. Bullets spark off its steel, but it never slows. Dozens of Marines brace for the blast, until one figure breaks cover, a lone Marine, RPG on her shoulder, steady as stone. The screen cuts to black. Who was she? And how did she get here? Before we dive into this story, where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Welcome to Grateful Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told. Let's uncover what really happened. The night sky over Afghanistan erupted with fire. Sirens wailed across the desert, sharp and relentless. A truck packed with explosives roared toward the gate, its engine screaming like a beast unleashed. From the shadows, one Marine broke cover. She was small against the glare, but her steps never faltered. An RPG rose to her shoulder, steady in her hands. The world held its breath. She aimed, squeezed, and fired. The blast swallowed the horizon in flame. The screen cuts to black. Who was she and how had she reached this moment years earlier? In the quiet town of Bourne, Texas, life moved at the pace of cattle on an open range. Dusty roads wound past pastures and weathered barns. In a modest home on the edge of town lived Elena Carter, the granddaughter of a Marine. Her grandfather's Navy Cross gleamed in a glass case, polished every Sunday after church. He would sit by the window, medal in hand, recounting the men he had fought beside. He spoke not of glory but of brotherhood, of standing when others had fallen. Elena listened to every word. She didn't ask questions, didn't interrupt. She simply absorbed the rhythm of his voice and the meaning behind his silences. The ranch became her proving ground. She tossed hay bales heavier than herself. She ran after stray cattle across rough terrain until her lungs felt like fire. There were no coaches, no stopwatches, no encouragement, only the land, the work, and her refusal to quit. Pain became familiar, but so did endurance. By the time she turned 18, her decision was set. She didn't want a farm. She wanted the eagle, globe, and anchor on her chest. She drove into San Antonio and walked into the recruiting station. Her jeans were dusty, boots worn, voice steady but low. Behind the desk sat Sergeant Mitchell, a Marine who had seen countless hopefuls walk through the door. He studied her in silence, brows raised. "You're not very tall," he said finally. "Boot camp's not kind to anyone, especially someone your size." Elena didn't flinch. "I've worked 16-hour days in 100-degree heat," she answered. "I don't quit when things hurt. I won't quit there either." The sergeant leaned back, testing her resolve. Then a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. He slid the paperwork across the desk. "Sign here. Carter, let's see if you're as tough as you think." Her hand didn't shake as she wrote her name. That was the first step toward the life she wanted. Training at Redford Island started in darkness and ended in exhaustion. Drill instructors broke down recruits with shouts, runs, and endless repetitions. The air was filled with the sound of boots hitting mud and voices cracking under pressure. Elena wasn't the fastest in formation. She wasn't the strongest on the obstacle course. But when others collapsed, she stayed on her feet. Push-ups left her arms quivering, but she never dropped to her knees. Marches blistered her feet, yet she never asked for relief. Insults hurled at her face slid off like rain. Other recruits noticed. Her silence became a shield. Her grit earned her a nickname whispered in the barracks stoneface. Graduation morning arrived with banners snapping in the wind. Families cheered from the stands. Elena stood in the center ranks, not at the front, but unbroken. Her grandfather was there, saluting quietly from the crowd. She caught his eye only once. The pride in his gaze spoke louder than words ever could. Her first orders sent her west. Camp Westfield in California sprawled across rolling hills, alive with the sound of helicopters and engines. Rows of barracks stretched like a small city, a place where discipline ruled every hour. Elena's assignment, the 17th Logistics Battalion. It wasn't combat, not the frontline action she once imagined, but every bullet, every bandage, every ration passed through her unit. She learned to count crates by weight, to drive forklifts through tight alleys. She logged shipments of ammunition, fuel, and medical kits. Mistakes weren't allowed. The cost was too high. Some Marines respected her work. They saw she arrived before dawn, left long after dark, never complained. Others, though, were not impressed. Corporal Henson was the loudest, a wall of muscle with tattoos crawling down both arms. He mocked her every chance he got. "This isn't a playground for women in uniform," he muttered whenever she passed. Elena said nothing. She kept her eyes forward, her focus on the job. Her silence infuriated him more than any response could. When sandbags needed moving, she volunteered. When trucks needed loading in the rain, she stepped forward. Her actions spoke in ways her words never could. One evening, after another 14-hour shift, she sat alone in the barracks. The room smelled faintly of boot polish and detergent. Her phone buzzed with a call from her grandfather. His voice was roughened by age, but steady as ever. "Remember, Elena," he told her, "being a Marine isn't about how strong you look. It's about standing when others fall." She pressed her hand against her pocket, where the small silver coin he once carried in Vietnam rested. It wasn't magic, but it reminded her that she came from a line of fighters. Every morning after that, she touched the coin before roll call. Every night, she touched it again before sleep. It was her way of saying she wasn't alone in this fight. Months passed in rhythm shipments, drills, and long nights under fluorescent lights. Elena grew leaner, harder, more certain of her place. Still, she knew the real test hadn't come yet. That test arrived with new orders. The 17th Logistics Battalion was deploying overseas, their next home Afghanistan. The announcement echoed through the barracks like a storm. Some Marines cheered, eager for combat. Others packed in silence, their eyes betraying fear. Elena sat on her bunk, boots laced tight, coin in hand. She whispered only 2 words to herself. "Don't quit." Outside, the transport planes roared, engines shaking the ground. The future waited across an ocean of sand and fire, and Elena Carter was ready to step into it. 6 months after Westfield, the order arrived. The 17th Logistics Battalion was deploying to Afghanistan. Their destination, Forward Operating Base Iron Creek, a speck of concrete in a sea of sand. The desert greeted them with no mercy. By noon, the thermometer hit 120 degrees. Every breath pulled dust deep into the lungs, choking and raw. Iron Creek was surrounded by ridges, high ground perfect for enemy eyes. Concrete barriers circled the base, topped with razor wire. Watchtowers rose at each corner, Marines inside gripping M240s. Inside the walls, chaos tried to become order. Convoys rumbled through the gate at all hours, loaded with supplies. Helicopters thundered overhead, whipping sand into storms that blinded the eyes. Elena Carter found herself in the logistics nerve center. Maps covered the walls, pins marking supply routes and drop zones. Her days blurred into a rhythm of manifests, radio calls, and endless calculations. She studied movement patterns, the timing of ambushes, the gaps no one else noticed. One route looked safe on paper, but she flagged it as a kill zone. Another appeared too long, yet she saw it was the only road without recent attacks. Lieutenant Daniel Spencer, a young officer with sharp instincts, began trusting her word. Before every convoy, he asked, "Which route today?" "Carter." And more than once, her advice saved lives. But Corporal Henson remained her shadow. "Paper shuffling doesn't make you a Marine," he muttered after one briefing. "Real Marines fight outside the wire." She ignored him, as always. Her focus was the mission, not his voice. Every crate, every bullet that reached its destination proved her worth. 3 months passed, each day tightening the knot of tension. Everyone knew an attack was coming. No one knew when. It happened just after sunset. The Afghan sky glowed purple when the first rocket slammed into the perimeter. The ground shook like an earthquake. An alarm screamed across the base. Incoming loudspeakers blared. Marines sprinted toward bunkers, grabbing rifles, helmets, and flak vests. Dust rained down as another explosion shattered the night. Elena had been finishing an inventory inside the supply shed. The blast ripped the ceiling open, filling the room with smoke. She snatched her helmet and rifle, bolting through the haze toward the nearest bunker. Corporal Henson was already there. He shot her a grin, cruel even under fire. Try not to cry when the real bullets start flying. She didn't answer. Her weapon clicked into place as she crouched beside him. The ridges outside flashed with muzzle fire, tracer rounds arcing red across the sky. Insurgents had staged the attack perfectly. Machine guns hammered from multiple directions. RPGs streaked into the walls, shaking concrete with every impact. Marines fired back with discipline, short bursts into the dark. The roar of M240s echoed from the towers. The base became a battlefield of fire and thunder. Elena steadied her rifle against the firing slit. Her breath slowed, eyes scanning the ridge. Shapes shifted among the rocks, creeping closer to the fence. 2 o'clock, 200 meters, she shouted. She fired in controlled bursts, her shots cracking the air. The figures collapsed into dust, momentum broken. For the first time, Henson turned toward her with no insult. Surprise flickered in his eyes. He had seen her skill, undeniable even here. The assault continued in waves. Mortars fell like hammers, rattling the ground. The air reeked of cordite, sweat, and burning fuel. Then came the new sound: an engine. Roaring closer, a truck burst into view, barreling straight for the main gate. Headlights cut through the smoke, unwavering in its path. VBI'd, someone screamed. Every weapon turned on the vehicle. Snipers fired, heavy guns thundered, sparks bouncing off armor plating. But the truck kept coming. Its body was covered in welded steel, makeshift armor that shrugged off rounds. Each second brought it closer to the wall. If it reached the gate, dozens would die. The blast would open a hole wide enough to flood the base with fighters. Iron Creek would fall. Elena's eyes locked on a weakness. A crude steel plate near the left front wheel hung loose. Exposed, small, but enough. She bolted from the bunker. Bullets kicked up sand around her boots. Henson shouted after her, voice raw with fear. "Carter, get back here." She didn't stop. She sprinted for the weapons cache near the sandbags. Her hands seized the cold weight of an RPG launcher. She dropped to one knee, braced the weapon, and aimed. The truck swerved, bouncing over craters, engine howling. Her heartbeat slowed, matching her breath. One shot, that was all. Her finger tightened on the trigger. The rocket screamed from the tube. A trail of fire carved across the desert. It struck just behind the driver's cabin, exactly where she aimed. The explosion tore the night apart. The truck lifted off the ground, splitting into shards of fire and steel. The blast wave ripped outward, flattening everything in its path. Elena was too close. The shock wave hurled her backward like a rag doll. She slammed into the concrete wall, helmet flying from her head. Pain seared through her body as shrapnel sliced across her face. Blood poured down her temple, staining her uniform. Her vision blurred to black. Marines rushed toward her, shouting her name. They lifted her onto a stretcher, boots pounding as they carried her away. Flames from the destroyed truck lit the battlefield behind them. "Don't let her die," the commander roared. "She just saved Iron Creek." His words carried through the smoke, fierce and desperate. The world slipped away from Elena Carter. Her body went limp on the stretcher, and as the battle raged on, she disappeared into darkness. The helicopter blades beat against the night, carrying Elena Carter out of Iron Creek. Her body was limp on the stretcher, blood soaking through bandages. Medics worked furiously, shouting over the roar of the engines. She woke days later in Germany. The ceiling lights blurred, voices echoing in her ears. Her left shoulder was bound tight, her legs stitched with rows of staples. The surgeons explained what they had done. Shrapnel had torn muscle and nerves. One fragment stayed deep inside her arm, too dangerous to remove. But the worst damage lay across her face. A scar now stretched from her temple to her jawline. Even with careful surgery, it would never disappear. After 3 weeks, she was flown back to the United States. Walter Reed Army Medical Center became her new battlefield. The halls smelled of antiseptic and echoed with the shuffle of crutches. For the first month, visitors came often. Marines from Iron Creek thanked her for saving their lives. Some left small gifts, a patch, a note, a coin. But as the weeks passed, the visits faded. Gratitude turned into whispers. New arrivals stared at her scar before looking away. The name began to spread. Scarface. Not said kindly, but with mockery. She overheard a pair of young Marines in the corridor. Probably her fault for standing too close to the truck. One muttered, "Lucky she survived at all." The other replied. Elena clenched her fist but said nothing. She limped back to her room, jaw set, eyes burning. Every insult cut deeper than shrapnel ever could. In the cafeteria, the whispers grew bolder. One day she carried a tray toward an empty seat. From across the room, a Marine called out, "Hey, Scarface, did you run or fight?" The laughter around his table stung like knives. Elena stopped, turned, and walked toward them. She placed her tray gently on their table. Her voice was calm, clear. "I didn't run. I fired. That truck never reached you because of me. If you want to know about VBIs, ask me. If you just want a joke, do it outside." The room fell silent. The young Marines stared down at their food. Not one dared answer. She picked up her tray and sat alone. The cafeteria buzz slowly returned, but softer now. Respect had not been earned, yet the sting of shame lingered in the air. Weeks later came another wound, this time to her spirit. She joined a group therapy session, a circle of chairs under bright lights. Dr. Wells, the counselor, encouraged them to share. When it was her turn, Elena began. She spoke about the night at Iron Creek, about the truck rushing the gate. Her words were quiet but steady. Before she could finish, a corporal cut in. "Come on, Carter," he scoffed. "You just got lucky. Don't act like some hero." Several Marines chuckled. The sound echoed in her ears, hollow and cruel. Elena froze, then stood abruptly. She walked out without a word. Only when she reached the empty hallway did the tears break free. For months she had endured pain in silence, but their scorn cracked her armor. That night, unable to sleep, she called home. Her grandfather's voice came through the line. "Steady as always. Talk to me. Elena, they call me Scarface," she whispered. "They think I was reckless. Maybe I don't belong anymore." Her words trembled like glass. He let silence sit for a moment, then spoke firmly. "Strength isn't about scars fading. It's about standing again after the fall. You've done it before. You'll do it again." She pressed his silver coin into her palm until the edge bit her skin. His words settled like steel in her chest. By dawn, her resolve had hardened. The next morning, she went to the gym. Master Sergeant Reed was waiting, arms crossed. He had lost part of his leg years earlier, but moved with unshaken authority. "You ready to work?" he asked. Elena nodded. No excuses. Training was merciless. Her arms screamed each time she pulled herself up on the bar. Her lungs tore with every lap around the track. But she didn't stop. Rain soaked her hair during dawn runs. By 6 a.m., she was drenched, gasping, but still moving. She practiced sit-ups until her scarred muscles quivered. She forced her shoulder through resistance bands, pain flashing bright. She counted seconds hanging from the bar, sweat dripping into her eyes. Progress was slow, but it came. One more repetition, one less pause between laps. Other wounded Marines began to notice. Some joined her, inspired by her grit. She said little, but her actions spoke volumes. Still, whispers didn't vanish. Some of the younger Marines snickered when she passed. Their eyes always darted to the scar on her face. This time, she didn't look away. She met their gaze, unflinching. Her scar was no longer shame. It was proof she had stood her ground. Unknown to her, word of both the cruelty and her resilience spread upward. Reports reached Marine leadership. Among those listening was Major General Margaret Collins. Collins commanded one of the largest installations in the country. She was known for her fierce sense of justice. When she heard about Elena, she decided to see for herself. The general arrived quietly, without announcement. One afternoon, she sat in the cafeteria, unnoticed among the crowd. Her eyes watched as the familiar scene unfolded. A group of Marines sneered as Elena entered with her tray. One muttered something crude, sparking laughter. Elena stopped, steady as ever. She set her tray on their table and delivered her calm, sharp reply. The air froze, just as it had before. The young Marines shifted uncomfortably, shame burning on their faces. General Collins observed every detail. She wrote one note in her small book. Then she stood and left without a word. For Elena, it was just another day survived. But unseen, a tide was beginning to turn, and her battle was no longer hers alone. The morning air was razor cold. Frost glazed the grass outside Walter Reed. Marines gathered along the track, whispering bets under their breath. This was the day of Elena Carter's evaluation. Months of sweat, pain, and silence had led to this moment. If she failed, her career ended here. She stepped up to the pull-up bar. Gloves tightened against the steel. 10 repetitions minimum required to pass. Her first 5 came steady, though her shoulder burned. By 7, her arms shook. Every pull was a battle against fire in her muscles. She gritted her teeth and rose again. 8, 9. Her whole body quaked as she reached 10. She dropped down, gasping for air. The crowd, silent at first, broke into murmurs of surprise. Even Henson, standing in the back, said nothing. Next came the 3-mile run. The track stretched under a pale November sky. Her breath puffed in white clouds as she pushed forward. Boots pounded behind her, some trying to keep pace. Her scarred legs carried her steady, one stride after another. She crossed the finish line almost 2 minutes ahead of the requirement. Sweat poured down her brow, but her eyes stayed sharp. A sergeant approached quietly. "I doubted you before." "Not anymore." Then came the unexpected additional assessment. An officer barked. Casualty evacuation drill. A stretcher was laid out with a weighted dummy strapped tight. Smoke billowed, sirens blared, explosions echoed through speakers. The order 200 meters under simulated fire. Elena seized the front handle. 2 younger Marines grabbed the sides, faces tense. She snapped commands with clarity. Left steady, eyes forward. Move. The stretcher lurched across the mud. Her shoulders screamed with each step, but she never slowed. Smoke stung her eyes. Artificial blasts rattled the ground. Still, she drove the team forward, barking orders until the finish line. They dropped the dummy at the marker. Elena fell to one knee, chest heaving. The observing colonel gave a curt nod. Noted, he said. The word carried weight. She had passed the test. That afternoon, she entered the conference room. The long table gleamed under harsh lights. 5 senior officers sat waiting. Among them was Major General Margaret Collins. Her presence filled the room, calm yet commanding. Elena stood at attention. Uniform immaculate, medals shining. Colonel Price, head of the panel, began. This board is convened to determine your fitness for continued service. His tone was flat, procedural, but the stakes were life-changing. The questions came one after another. The medical officer pressed on her shoulder injury. Could she lift full combat load? Could she climb walls in gear? The personnel chief asked about her future. Would her injuries block her advancement? Would her scar affect the Corps' public image? The combat veteran leaned forward, You've seen trauma in battle. How do we know you won't freeze when it happens again? His voice carried the weight of someone who had. Elena's reply was steady. Sir, I didn't freeze when a truck full of explosives charged my base. I won't freeze when Marines need me again. The senior enlisted advisor spoke last. You've been mocked for your scars. How do you plan to face that if it continues? All eyes fixed on her. She didn't hesitate. I don't ask for lowered standards. I don't ask for sympathy. Respect is earned by performance, and I'll prove it every day. The panel dismissed her to deliberate. She walked out, heart pounding, coin from her grandfather pressed tight in her palm. Behind the door, the debate began. The medical officer worried about long-term health. The personnel chief muttered about optics. But General Collins rose to her feet. I saw her mocked in front of her peers. She said, I saw how she responded with composure, with dignity, with courage. That is leadership. Her voice cut through the room like a blade. She is not a liability. She is exactly what the Corps needs. The silence that followed was heavy. The balance had shifted. After an hour in it, the vote was unanimous. Elena was called back into the room. Colonel Price read the decision aloud. Lance Corporal Carter, this board finds you fit for continued military service. No restrictions, no limitations. Relief surged through her chest. Her eyes glistened, but she kept her bearing. Before she could speak, Collins added, there is one more matter. The general's tone carried something different, personal. The room cleared, leaving only the two of them. Collins stepped closer. I'm launching a new program, Wounded Warrior Advocacy. It will fight discrimination and give Marines like you a voice. Her gaze sharpened. I want you on my team. You'll travel to bases, speak to Marines, and help change this culture. Her words were not a suggestion. Elena hesitated. She had dreamed of returning quietly to a unit, but this was something larger, heavier. Why me, she asked softly. Collins didn't blink. Because you've lived it. Because you turned mockery into resolve. Because strength isn't hiding scars, it's carrying them. Elena drew a breath, shoulders straightening. I'll do it. If I can spare one Marine what I endured, it's worth it. Her voice carried the weight of decision. Collins extended her hand. Outstanding. Welcome to the fight. Their handshake sealed a new mission. Weeks later, Elena stood in front of her first audience. Rows of Marines filled the hall, faces skeptical, curious. She spoke simply, without theatrics. She told them about Iron Creek, the truck, the blast. She told them about Walter Reed, the whispers, the names. She told them what it meant to rise anyway. The room fell into silence. Then a young private approached, his right arm ending at the wrist. His voice shook. I thought I was finished, but you showed me scars aren't endings. Elena pressed her grandfather's coin into his hand. It carried me. Now it's yours. Tears welled in his eyes as he closed his fist around it. The hall remained hushed, a moment no one would forget. Outside, the first light of dawn touched the barracks. Elena Carter walked out into the cold morning air. Her scar caught the sun, sharp and unhidden. She no longer carried it as a burden, it had become her proof of courage. And for the first time since Iron Creek, she felt whole again.